Joining us is a man who's no stranger to the Observer. Let me say a pleasant good evening to Oropouche West MP and UNC Shadow Minister of Finance, Dave Tancoo. Special good evening and Happy New Year to you, Mr. Tancoo, and your entire family.
Thank you very much, Mikey. Good night to everyone. I wish you all a very happy and safe 2024 as we move forward. Thank you all.
Thank you. The Prime Minister says he sees hopeful signs for 2024. And he says that we can anticipate that the new year will be one full of risk, even as it holds considerable promise. We can anticipate that the increases in the minimum wage and other government policies will further ease the cost of living burden on the most vulnerable. What say you?
Well, Mikey and your listeners, I would not get into the quander of saying that the Prime Minister is misleading the population. What I would say, though, is that he's cherry picking his facts. He's selectively selecting, using data to create his Nancy story. That Nancy story that they have been promoting for the last 8 years, that the country is doing well, the economy is growing, when the facts show otherwise. It's ironic that the Prime Minister is saying to welcome 2024 with greatness. He sees so much promise, etc. And on the same breath, he's saying that there are risks. If after 8 years and $420 billion in expenditure, this country has gotten progressively worse, I don't see what in 2024, what miracle in 2024, except a general election where he loses. I don't see what miracle could take place in 2024 or in 2025 which will change the direction that this government, this PNM government, and I almost said Patrick Manning, God bless his soul, but Dr. Keith Rowley and his bunch of minions, I don't see anything that they could do in the next 2 years that will change the direction that they put this country in, downwards for the average citizen.
I've always asked, as far as looking at the economy, people could use statistics and that can be easily manipulated. But the reality of it is that, living on a daily basis, and you'll hear the conversation and the narratives, people ask, well, how much more sacrifice are we supposed to make? How much more tightening of our belt that we need to do? Where's the payoff? What's going to happen? And it doesn't seem to have, whether it be a long-term or mid-term plan, as how are we going to get out of here? How do we get out of this situation? The Prime Minister said it has been, last year was the first full year, active year, after the pandemic. But even prior to the pandemic, we had some serious economic challenges and problems. So when you hear this sort of, conversation about things have turned around, very optimistic, it makes you wonder if it's just a matter of pressing reset to find ourselves back in the same situation that we've been in for the last 8 years.
Mikey, part of the problem is that the government refuses to accept the facts that average citizens are confronting on a daily basis. And if they don't accept the facts that things are bad, then they will not take policies to fix it. That is why they have done nothing about crime. They have done nothing about the crisis in the health sector where people have to wait months and years for emergency surgery. They've done nothing about infrastructure. They've done nothing about job creation. They've just sat back and hoped that miracles will happen. They've pegged all their hopes on gas. They pegged all their hopes on the dragon gas materializing. And there's no indication that that will materialize in the very near future in any way. So that we are in a situation where government is delusionally pursuing policies based on the assumption that things are fine and busily trying to create the perception, create the narrative through public relations gimmicks to convince citizens it's gaslighting us, to convince citizens that things are fine. The Prime Minister, in his New Year's Day message, which you just referenced, touted that inflation fell from 10% in May to 1.9%. Mikey, let me just share a piece of information for the listening audience. When you have an inflation rate of 10% in May, it meant that food prices, and this was food prices specifically, it meant that food prices increased by 10% in May. When he says now that inflation has dropped by 1.9% in October, it means it's 1.9% more on top of the 10 point whatever percent that has gone on. So as long as there's a positive inflation rate, as long as inflation is positive. As long as the number is 1.3%, it means that prices are going to increase. It uses that statistic to mislead the population.
I don't know if you're moving around. You're sort of breaking up a bit. You get right back to where you were.
Right. The Prime Minister is using the inflation rate to create the perception that things are getting better. Just like he threw in the increase in salaries, the increase in minimum wage, etc., that things are going to get, the burden that they're putting on the population will ease. We already know, those of us who live in this country know that when you have property tax, when you have increase in water rates and electricity rates, when you have increased food prices and prices for everything else going up, this 4% that they try to convince the population they've increased minimum wage salaries by and minimum wages by, etc. That has disappeared. You're giving people 4% interest and you're now admitting that in 1 month in May, there was a 10% inflation rate.
Yeah, but again, Mr. Dago, I mean, a lot of these things are in our face. I mean, we're about, let's say realistically, 20 or 21 months away from a general election. Then I don't think perception is going to be able to last that long, that length of time. Reality has to kick in. I mean, we saw it over the Christmas holidays. People basically bought the bare necessities, what they figure that they can use throughout the holidays. But as far as consumer confidence, it's at an all-time low. No one is letting go of a $5 or $10 because there's no guarantee that $3 or $4 is going to come back to you. No one's doing that. So government must be aware of the fact of how spending is going, consumer confidence is going, the mere fact that we simply do not have an economy that is working for the people. And I don't think there's enough time to even roll out anything, as you said. But again, time is against us as far as trying to roll this out to gain traction for an upcoming general election.
Mikey, we have heard about roadmap to recovery. Remember that?
Yeah.
We have heard about multiplicity of plans by the government at the early stages. They've done nothing. The reason they have done nothing is because they're busy feeding off the public purse. They're busy taxing. If there's so much development as this government has been seeing for the last 8 years, if there's been so much of growth and development, why are we selling assets in our fire state? MHTL 2 years ago was announced as a very valuable asset, which will be used to generate revenue streams for this country. Now the government is selling it off. If it's not going so well, if the economy is going so well, why are they punishing people with property tax? Why are they increasing utility rates? Why is it that the flour prices are about to go up? Why is it that all of these individual things are now being pushed onto the backs of a population which we know cannot afford it if the country is doing so well? When an economy is doing well, the country should benefit. The average citizens should see growth and development. The Prime Minister instead uses, like I said, uses figures to mislead. He talked about a reduction in the unemployment rate. Unemployment is now ridiculously low. The facts are that employment in 2023, June 2023, based on the review of the economy, there was 587,400 people employed as of June 2023. That's the last statistic that I have available. I don't know if he probably has his own statistics made up, but I will talk about that in a few minutes. So in June 2023, 587,400 people employed. You know what it was in September 2015 when they came in? It was 620,200. So employment has not been increasing. In fact, unemployment has been increasing. The labor force has been shrinking because people are getting frustrated and have stopped looking for jobs. But you see, we're using CSO statistics. And there has not been a CSO survey for years. It's way overdue. So even those statistics you cannot have confidence in. The facts from the NIB reports that we know is that there are now less people contributing. That means that more people and more businesses have shut down, have left the system. And that's another thing. The economy is doing so well, and we are in a serious crisis with the National Insurance Board. citizens are being put at risk. Their revenue streams for the future, their savings, their national savings are being put at risk because this government simply has done nothing to protect their interests.
One of the highlights that the Prime Minister spoke about, that he highlighted, he says that in this year, 2024, the Ministry of Social Development will roll out a national register in which it will track the lives of the most vulnerable among us. Now, many people who are now in that category of most vulnerable were active, working citizens of this country. And I quite clearly that many people would tell you, listen, we are not trying to have a handout or a hamper economy. People want to put their shoulders to the wheel and get sustainable employment so they can feed their families and by extension help build Trinidad and Tobago. But it seems as though now that a register is going to be put in place, who is going to be, I mean, it doesn't add up.
Mikey, I understand the need for the register. But if after 8 years and billions of dollars spent on grants of all sorts from this government, they still have no clue about who they gave and who are those who are in need. They still have no clue, and that's what this statement is about. When he says they're going to put a register in place, it's because they really have no idea of what they're doing. 8 years and several $billions given away in grants, and we know that they give it away for all kinds of nefarious political reasons instead of giving it to those who are in need. But it's an admission that they have no clue about what they were doing. They have a Ministry of Social Development that is operating Mikee K, randomly, providing no justification and explanation for the billions being spent that should have been going to help people survive crises that this government is putting in.
And one of the other things that he highlights, of course, in the Ministry of Public Utilities, the government will be utilizing the facilities of an IDB loan for improved water delivery with targets that deliver a reliable water supply to 90% of the population in the new year. Now, we were at a position under the last regime where, in fact, all these blue barrels and people trying to catch water on the side of the road, all of that was gone. I mean, you had a water supply, an adequate water supply. Now we're going to the IDB, having a loan to come out and actually try to get water to areas that once had water, but for whatever reason, that in itself has been shut down.
Mikey, that is all a bunch of mamagai. In that same statement, the Prime Minister said that they're expecting to greet 90% of the population with a regular water supply. We just came out of the worst water crisis in our history, where South and Central Trinidad and Tobago were without a water supply, pipe-borne or truck-borne, for up to 2 to 3 months at a time. That has not stopped. In parts of my constituency in Oropouche West. Today, I received calls that some of the communities have been without Ramjohn Trace, etc., have been without water supply in pipes or truck-borne for 21 days. So all this talk about reliable water supply for 90% of the population in the year 2024, that, for me, is wishful thinking. When we challenged the Minister of Public Utilities in the Parliament and asked him what he was going to do to make sure that people did not have to go to the point where they were desperate for water, literally living day to day without regular water to drink or to cook, much less to wash with. The minister said they were going to do several things, including drilling wells. He repeated the same thing in May that he said in March, that he also repeated in the budget debate. They have done nothing because they have no priorities. But while that is happening, there are some areas of this country that has 24/7 water supply.
Yeah.
And they're telling people in South and Central Trinidad and Tobago that you'll be on a schedule, and every 14 days you'll get a water supply. So what is supposed to happen between that? That is the ambition this government has for the population of this country. They must have you in a state of perpetual dependency, where you must beg for what is your right. You must beg somebody to give you water. If you can't get it, you have to pay for it for yourself. If we are having to pay for water supply, a private supply of water, and we have to pay for private health care, and we have to patch our roads ourselves, what the hell are we doing with this government? Why are we paying taxes? And you're coming to bring property tax now. to tell people when you get property tax, you'll get all of these things. Hogwash.
And I mean, these are 9 things that are outlined here: minimum wage, unemployment, energy sector, social development, national register, initiatives in the Ministry of Health, programs for diabetes and hypertension, public servants, and the list goes on for these 9 things. But the reality here, Mr. Tancoo, is that many people who have waited on this, especially economists, has made it quite clear that the middle class has been wiped out. People who had a 2-car home but now has 1 vehicle, people who had put aside to send their children for higher education, tertiary education, even outside of the country, that money is not there. So how are they making ends meet? The entire middle class has been affected. And all of these initiatives really and truly add up to nothing if we cannot get people back to work, if we cannot bring about economic security, and if we cannot deal with consumer confidence. Are we then simply just spinning top in mud?
We are absolutely just spinning top in mud. This government is on autopilot. Nobody is running the ship. I hope that they will be held to account in the next election. But I want to throw you back to the Great Depression. During the Great Depression, the United States was going through this very severe time when there was no employment was at its lowest ever.
Yeah.
And what the government of the United States did then is created jobs.
You're breaking up again. You want to stay one, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. What the government of the United States did to get out of the Great Depression was to create jobs. That's when they started building railways, etc., etc., throughout, opening up the country, developing various initiatives so that they could diversify the economy, etc. So what is critically required now, which has been required, what is critically required from 2015 come back, is the creation of jobs, real sustainable jobs. This government has not been doing that. That is why, with all the talk that they're talking now, they have not established a situation where, as the Prime Minister himself managed to admit, even though glibly so, they have not established a situation where they can create an environment that will be attractive for business to invest. They have not done that. And as long as crime is as high as it is, as long as there's such a huge difficulty in getting access to foreign exchange, as long as the government fails to treat with the needs of the small and medium-sized sector, we will continue to be in crisis, because that's the group that creates the maximum amount of employment. That's the group from which we get the middle class.
Yeah.
That instead, Mikey, what we are seeing big business take over small business because they have access to all the resources, they have access to foreign exchange, etc., etc., etc. We are seeing big business eclipse small business, push them out of operation.
And you're correct. Even if you look in the energy sector, you see people who would be dealing with fried chicken franchises are now part of the energy sector, and they bought these companies for pennies on the dollar. So they took advantage of a situation. But the fact of the matter still remains, my heart really goes out to the senior citizens in this country. I mean, we're talking property tax, and you mentioned it earlier. But these are individuals on fixed incomes. They have to pay for medicine, which is a priority. They have to pay for food. Some of them may not be living in their homes. These are people who put their shoulders to the wheel in order to lead the way and blaze the trail for many of us who came after. Now today, these very same people in their twilight years are going to have to deal and have the anxiety to have to deal with these bills and these extra costs when, again, they don't have the money.
Well, I'm glad you raised the property tax, because I wanted to touch on 2 issues there. People in Suchet-Trace Penal have started getting their assessments. And in some of those areas, Suchet-Trace is one of those areas that floods with 3 and 4 feet of water. It's one of those areas that floods because it's along the river bank where the government has refused to raise the river banks, etc. I'm very curious as to find out from the government how they came up with an assessment that one of those properties is able to generate $3,000 a month. If for 3 and 4 months of the year, these properties are under flood, how are these people going to now have to pay property tax? But it's not just that, there's another issue that has come up. If you have two identical houses, one rented out, so this is one that is owned by somebody who has now rented it out, let's call him Imbert. So call Imbert now, well, let me forget the call Imbert. Imbert has a property that he owns and is rented out.
Yeah.
And Nani has a property right next to him, identical in shape, identical in number of rooms. Nani has a property that she is living in. Do you know what happens? The rental, the property that is rented out, they're using that value to determine what Nani has to pay. Now that rented out property is generating an income. So yes, I could see if you could want to tax a property that's generating an income, that's a property to tax. Yeah. But Nani's property is not generating an income. But she is going to be charged the same tax as a property that's earning an income. That's wrong. That's unethical.
I agree with you.
But what about the industrial and commercial property tax?
Yeah.
Those are places that generate income from the property. So they are penalizing people, like you said, who would have sacrificed all their lives. Home ownership is the largest single investment that people make. They would have sacrificed all their lives to save their money to build their property so they could live comfortably in. They would have spent extra to put in air conditioning for their own comfort. They would have spent extra to paint it and have it looking good. If you drive around this country today, you would see conditions to which properties have been forced to be taken to. Because you are afraid to paint your house because now they'll come and increase in value. You are afraid to maintain your property, your investment, because then the government is coming, Imbert and his crew is coming with evil eye to penalize you for investing and for saving. Where else in the world does a government penalize an economy, penalize citizens for saving? That's what they should be encouraging citizens to do.
And I agree with you fully. Our time is up. I want to thank you so much again, Mr. Tancoo. I mean, looking into the new year, we don't really know what to expect. What can we predict as far as the economy? We know it's going to be a bumpy ride. We started off once again with more murders than days of the year, and we've been here before. And again, very unfortunate. But keep up the good work. Best of luck to you and your entire team, and we'll be speaking to you, of course, again throughout this entire year.
Thank you, Mikey. In closing, I just want to urge citizens to step up and speak up now. We are running out of time before this thing gets so bad that it becomes impossible to pull back from the edge.
I agree with you 100%. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.